1. I'm curious what people have to say about this. If it wasn't paranormal, it was certainly a peculiar series of events. So a couple of years ago now, I lived in this cute little quaint town. It had a fun downtown area with various interesting shops, bars, and restaurants. During Christmas, downtown was all lit up. This is all for setting, of course. At the time, I lived with a now ex, and my sister lived nearby, about 5 minutes away from me. So we'd often find it difficult to sleep and go around town, as it was pretty safe. At the time, my sister worked for some local newspapers and magazines, and had found out some interesting things about the town. First, there was also an orange tree grove not far from our homes, and in the center of the grove was a pond. At some time in the late 1800s, an entire family, parents and children, all drowned in the pond. This is a verifiable fact, researched by my sister. But this is where my tale starts to get to the spooky part. There is a little cemetery in town that is essentially open all the time because of its location and the low crime rate. Well, Sis tells me we can go there and see the family's headstone for ourselves. She's been once before already, I believe. There was also another marker of particular interest that I'll describe later. So we park the car and cross the street over to the cemetery. It's not really scary looking and is fairly well lit, but I had a feeling. Obviously I ignored the feeling or I wouldn't be writing this. We enter the walk along a roughly paved path with graves on either side, and light posts occasionally right at the edge of the pavement along the path, and on paths that branched off from the main one. We approach the branch pathway we need to find our final destination. As we walk below the lights, they each flicker as we pass. The weird feeling is a little stronger, but I shrug it off. We reach the stone of the poor drowned family first. I took a picture or two because it was so old and interesting. And as I did, I heard a growl. Kind of like a person, but the quality of the sound is hard to describe. I looked around with the flashlight on my phone, kind of expecting some crazy guy to jump us. But there was nobody. I decided not to mention it to my sister, and she didn't act like or say that she heard it. We move along to the second marker of interest I mentioned earlier. This one is even more weather-worn and older, placed near the center of the cemetery, generally where the oldest graves are. It only says Mother, no dates, nothing else on the stone at all. We have no idea who Mother might have been, and we couldn't find info about it at the time. Naturally, I snap a quick photo of the intriguing marker, and again I hear the same strange growl. I have my knife out now and shine my light around. Again I see and hear nothing else. This time I asked my sister if she heard it, and she had. Well, after that we left in a bit of a hurry. I paused to apologize to any spirits. I said we meant no harm, and we were only curious. Don't follow us home. We left, and the same light posts flickered only when we passed under them. We got in the car and left. So sorry that was so long, but at the time it was pretty intense. Rationality says it was someone growling and shit to scare us, but I would have heard or seen someone else. There was a good amount of open space. And if it was just some crazy guy, why not attack or something? We were just two petite girls. Either way, I had a creeped feeling the whole time I was there. So any thoughts about what the heck I heard that night? The growl sounded so strange, like I'd almost imagined it, which was why I didn't mention it the first time. But my sister later told me she heard it the first time as well, but didn't want us to get freaked out. Not the first or last strange thing I've experienced, though. Anyway, thanks for listening. 2. When I was 14, I spent every other weekend at my dad's house after my parents divorced. My bedroom there was down a long hallway and was the last room on the left. My dad's and stepmom's room was across the hallway from mine to the right side. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was laying in bed watching TV with the bedroom door open. Out of nowhere, this horrible feeling came over me, and I felt completely terrified. I felt that something was in the doorway and staring at me from the dark hallway. I had never been this scared in my life before. I couldn't even move. It was this dark, heavy, and oppressive feeling that just kept hitting me in waves. I couldn't physically see anything, but I knew 100% that something was there. It was blocking me from getting to my dad even if I could move. This went on for about 15 to 20 minutes. I then felt it move over to my window on the right side of my room. I felt whatever it was now watching me through the window. I started to hear faint scratching from my window. I began to pray. I had been trying to pray, but for some reason it was difficult. It was hard to get the words out, let alone think them. I finally felt safe enough to run out of my room and across to my dad's and wake him up. I told him I felt like something was outside my window. He got up and searched around the whole outside of the house and found nothing. I was still so shaken up it was hard to fall asleep. I finally did around 4 a.m. In the morning I called my mom and told her what had happened. I actually started to cry when telling her. Something had been in my room and was terrifying and full of hatred. It was and still is very hard to explain. Fast forward about 2 years. I'm hanging out with my mom and older sister. I'm 16 now and my sister is 24. Something in the conversation made me start talking about that night. My mom and sister start acting all weird and giving each other looks. I kept repeating, "What? What?" And they were acting so strange. My mom finally says, "We didn't want to tell you before because we didn't want to scare you more. But your sister called me that same morning before you and said something evil had visited her that night too." My sister says the same thing happened to her. A dark presence woke her up at about 1 a.m. She woke up with the feeling that something was on her chest. She told it out loud, "You are not welcome here," and began to pray. She says she actually saw a black mass fly up above her, and it was then flung backwards out of the window. It scared my mom and sister both, and was truly unexplainable, but also had confirmed that something very real had visited us in the same night. Thinking back on my phone conversation that morning with my mom, I then understood why she seemed so spooked and weirded out when I told her about my experience. I had been expecting her to say something along the lines of it just being my imagination. My family and I are not deeply religious, nor do we attend church regularly. But the only way to make this thing go away was to pray. Typing all this out has actually made me all jumpy, and has given me a stomachache. I'd say that's enough for now. Edit. I got off work and have been reading through the comments. I see a lot of people saying it was sleep paralysis. For one, I don't really mind if anyone wants to think it was. I realize in rereading my post again by myself saying I couldn't move really makes it seem that way, and I apologize. I just want to clarify. Prior to this incident, I had experienced sleep paralysis before as well as after. I know what it feels like. You're unable to move, cry out, or even wiggle your fingers or toes. You're awake, but your body will not respond to what you want it to do. This was not that. I was very much awake and alert, sitting propped up on pillows in bed. I had full control over my body. I was frozen in fear, and did not want to move much or yell out because I felt it would come rushing straight at me. I did make small movements, I remember, grabbing my blankets, turning my head to the side when it moved to my window, then making my run for it. 3. I'm from a small rural town in the Midwest, and growing up I was super religious and fascinated by paranormal stories. Seriously, I loved the Travel Channel when I was in grade school. I would always watch those true ghost story shows that had the dramatic recreations. I used to always ask my parents if they believed in ghosts or paranormal stuff, and they would always say no. Fast forward to when I was in middle school, and we moved into a new house. My paranormal interest had mostly passed, as I was getting older and had decided that ghosts were not real. When we moved, we knew that the previous owner had passed away in the house, in what is now my parents' bathroom. Her name was Anna, and she had really liked smoking and baking cakes and ugly floral wallpaper. For the most part, everything was super normal. We moved in and I started 7th grade that fall. After months of living there, I began to notice strange things happening that I could never really explain but would always just ignore. A shadow moving in the corner of my eye here. A kitchen sink turning on by itself there. Weird footsteps, and the TV turning off but nothing else that was plugged in. Just a TV, and the sound would still be going. You know, normal stuff. Until one day I was babysitting my brother, who was just a toddler at the time, with a friend. It was the middle of the afternoon. We were hanging out in the super cool new addition my parents built, and I was laying my brother down for a nap on the couch. We turned the TV down super low and he quickly fell asleep, so we took the opportunity to relax and rest our eyes while watching TV. All three of us were basically asleep on the couch when I heard the front door open and heavy footsteps. I called out thinking it was my dad, when I heard the kitchen sink turn on and no reply and more footsteps. I got up to investigate. The water was left running, so I turned it off. I then looked out the front door to see if my dad's truck was there. He wasn't. Weird. I shrugged my shoulders and returned to the couch, not thinking much about it. Even though there was no way my dad could have come home, walked inside to turn the sink on, and leave, which, let's be honest, that would be a very weird thing to do, in the amount of time it took me to get up and look for him. Whatever. A few more months go by. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework after school, waiting for my parents to come home. I remember this very clearly because it was right around the time that song Lady Antebellum, Need You Now was super popular, and I had just heard it on the XM radio. Anyways, I was in the middle of homework when the radio goes dead. I was super focused on my homework, so I didn't notice right away. That's when I hear the sink turn on. I got up, turned it off and sat down to finish my homework. A few minutes passed and I heard a large amount of water splash onto the kitchen counter. I jumped from my seat, freaked out by the noise, and got up to investigate, only to find a puddle of water on the counter and floor. I was the only one home, so I was trying to rationalize how the water got there in the first place. Unsettled, I cleaned up the mess and returned to my homework. I didn't know what to say about the incident, or the one prior to that when I was babysitting, so I didn't talk about it with my parents for a long time. Weird stuff continued to happen, and I continued to ignore it. I always just thought there was some way to explain it. Entertainment items turning off or pausing for no reason. It was probably the electronics or the power outlets. Kitchen sinks turning on by themselves. Maybe I turned it on and forgot. Footsteps. That was just my imagination. Forgot about the weird water incident altogether. I don't remember how it started, but one day my parents and I were eating dinner, and someone made an offhanded remark about weird stuff happening. I think it was my mom, so I started asking questions. Has the TV ever turned off for no reason? Yes. Have you ever seen a weird shadow in the corner of your eye? Yes. Has the sink turned on by itself? Yes, yes, yes for them. It was always their bathroom sink. I laughed, almost relieved to talk about the weird stuff. My parents and I spent hours talking about all the weird experiences we had. I told them about when I was babysitting, and my mom said she had something very similar happen. She said she was sitting on the same couch I was, we have 2 living rooms, and heard the door open and heavy footsteps. Thinking it was either me or my dad, she called out and was met with no answer. She gets up to investigate and nothing. No one is home except for her. We decided that we were being haunted by a ghost. I think we were joking about it for the most part, but over the years, I'm 22 now, plenty of weird stuff has happened that we have all decided that we were haunted. We're not sure if it's Anna or not, but we like to think it is. Anytime something weird happens, we yell something to the extent of, "God damn it, Anna, stop it!" This happens mostly during the fall when she's most active. I can't really explain that fact either, but she acts up the most during September, October, and November. Another weird thing is that she really hates heavy metal and screamo music. I used to listen to it all the time, and she would pause the iPod dock. Not even turn it off, just pause. Doesn't matter where the iPod dock is plugged in, doesn't matter which one, I've had plenty over the years. And it doesn't matter who's listening. She hates that stuff. My mom will be listening to it, and Anna will turn off the music or pause it 1,000,000 times, until my mom changes the music to something like bluegrass or something quieter. Anna will stop after that. But my mom gets pretty annoyed because she just wants to listen to the music, Anna. Over the years, Anna hasn't acted up as much. A few days ago, my mom sent me a text, I've moved to a different state, and how my family recently brought in my grandparents' grandfather clock. Here's what she said. "I shit you not. We have the grandfather clock from Papa and Grandma's house. The pendulum has not swung, nor has the clock turned since we brought it home. As a matter of fact, the key to get it started is missing. All of a sudden, it's 5:45 according to the clock. About 45 minutes behind the current time, the clock chimes. Dad and I turned towards the clock because we weren't sure if it was on Harry Potter or in our house. The pendulum on the clock is moving and the clock face is moving. It really was the clock chiming in our house we heard. This can only mean one thing. Anna is back." I died laughing. Anna was probably just curious about why my parents couldn't get the clock to work, and decided to take things into her own hands. Some things to note. I did ask if my brother had been messing with it, and she said no. Also, Anna doesn't do big things like that very often, especially when there's more than one person home. But when she does, it's always super surprising and funny. Though she has kicked my dog before, which sucks. 4. For a while now, my family and I have been hearing strange noises from time to time, seemingly with no source. Only 2 areas in my house are not carpeted, our kitchen and the hallways. Both of the previous owners are deceased now, but from time to time, we hear things literally crashing to the ground. But upon inspection, usually can't find a source. Me and my parents are in the kitchen when we hear a bang from something that sounded metallic and hollow come from the living room, which is carpeted. We have a bucket in there, but it's always on the ground. I check the living room and the bucket is sideways on the mantel of our fireplace, still slowly moving back and forth as if it had fallen over. The only explanation I can muster is that it was dropped onto the mantel. By who or what, I couldn't tell you. Another case happened to our wine fridge. It's a mini fridge with a clear door. My parents keep all of the alcoholic beverages that need to remain chilled in it. One day when I was home alone, I hear a bang from the kitchen. I go to investigate, and nothing is on the floor that shouldn't be on the floor. I turn to leave the kitchen, when I notice one of the rather large bottles has made its way seated from the back, perpendicular to the door, to drop down to the bottom of the fridge parallel. I open the door, put it back, and I remember thinking, this is too heavy to just move from a state of support in the very back to falling out of the fridge. The last and most recent occurrence was when I, again in the living room, again hear a bang in the kitchen. This time it's a very, very loud bang. I walk in and immediately notice that the washer and dryer have been moved apart by about 4 inches. The front corners are no longer touching like they once were. This could only result from someone reaching between them and moving them away, or from someone pushing from behind, of which there is a wall right behind them. I'm sorry I don't have any video evidence. I'll try to remember to take on the next time I hear something. The reason I felt to post this today was because I just heard a deep bark come from somewhere in the house, and the only dogs we have are Chihuahuas. It kind of spooked me and prompted me to write about these events. My mom thinks they're the previous owners of the house, just coming back from time to visit. And I'm beginning to think it's the truth. 5. As a bit of context, I've seen or experienced paranormal activity about as far back as I can remember. The first experience I clearly remember happening when I was a toddler, and my shoe that I was reaching for jumped half a foot in the air. Fast forward to 2014. Growing up, my dad and I had a good connection with a family that lived about 25 minutes away from us. I'll call them the Jones for anonymity. My dad had worked with the husband named Doug before I was even born, and I grew up playing with their daughter Callie. In 2014, I was working for a sporting goods store in Missoula, Montana. I was the cashier, and it was a relatively busy Friday afternoon, around 3:15 p.m. I looked up at the line of customers behind the current guest I was helping, and I saw Doug standing there smiling. It had been a year since I had last seen him, so I finished helping my guest and looked up again, searching for him in the line. He wasn't there. I helped the next guest, and by then our line had died down to nothing. Other tills were open to handle the influx of customers. I looked towards the door, and he was standing there, still smiling at me. I walked up to him as he backed up, seemingly dodging a hug. I said, "Hey, Doug, it's been a while. How have you been?" He said, "Hey, kiddo, doing just fine. It's nice to see you. I gotta get going, but I'll see you later," and walked out. I thought it was a bit rude he had brushed off the hug like that, since he was practically like my second dad. But whatever, he must have been in a huge hurry, I thought. That Saturday, I went to the Nine Pipes Wildlife Refuge in Ronan, Montana. I photographed the migratory birds and mountains before returning home to a text message on my phone. It was from Doug's daughter, Callie. She said that Doug had been in a freak accident on Monday, and that life support had been keeping him alive in a coma. They unplugged the machine on Friday around 3 p.m. It took a few minutes while the wheels in my head clicked into place, immediately causing me to plop on the ground and start sobbing. Like I said, paranormal activity was nothing new to me, but seeing someone so clearly and vividly, and in the middle of the day, was still beyond my comprehension. To this day, I still have not told Callie this story, because I fear her reaction to it. And I have not seen Doug since. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 102. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd also like to give a shout out specifically to Reddit user Happy Little Wretch, who was the author of the first story. Thank you kindly for letting me use your story. I'm going to keep the rest of the outro brief on this one because, as you know, I've got oodles to do. Not to worry though, I'm making my way through it. I'm getting close to the halfway point. Well, at least I will today. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.